From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, this is Iowa Ag Matters. In today's show, Dustin talks with Karen St. Germain of NASA about the organization's relationship with agriculture. Mark brings us another clip from the latest episode of Pods of Potential, and I have a check of the latest U.S. export sales with Ben Breisch of Allendale. I'm Riley Smith, one of your hosts for today, and joining me now is Dustin Huffman. And Dustin, we are wrapping up a very, very busy week in the ag marketplace with all the reports we saw, and hopefully today maybe things can simmer down a little bit before we head into the weekend.
Yeah, that it hopefully will, but it's definitely with no shortage of drama. As President Trump on his way back to the United States after his meeting with President Xi, and no real firm commitments on anything for ag purchases. Now, doesn't mean that things weren't talked about, but didn't hear what we kind of wanted, and that's what's been putting pressure on the markets, as we'll see later on the middays. But it's, as we talk with Matt Bennett of agmarket.net later on here too, it's just been one of those things where we were hoping to come back with some kind of a signed agreement, and it sounds like we got nothing more than a handshake agreement right now. And so it's going to be, impossible to enforce, quite frankly, and that's what's going to make things a little bit difficult. And that's what's going to give the markets a little more pause here as we head into the weekend. And as Matt said, we've been pretty well oversold in a lot of these markets here for the last week or so.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that you need to look at the market prices from where they started maybe earlier this week, earlier in the month, and not just from the big numbers that we saw maybe yesterday on the screen, because a lot of the marketplaces now today, with more losses might be now net low, but how low is the real question, because some of those prices aren't too off of where they were recently anyways. So yes, we should be keeping an eye on that. And yes, there are concerns in the marketplace. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button quite yet. But speaking of the market conversation, Dustin, you mentioned visiting with Matt Bennett of agmarket.net for a check of the grains.
And joined by Matt Bennett of agmarket.net. And Matt, it was a tough day for the grains yesterday, to say the least, and it's starting off negative today. What are we seeing on this Friday?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the summit between President Trump and Xi didn't go the way a lot of folks were hoping it would. I mean, essentially what we're getting from that is that the original soybean plan, if you will, 25 million tons per year, is something that we're just, I guess we're all going to assume that's what's going to happen. They said that they didn't have any more work to do there, but they're talking about other ag products. And so the trade took that as a negative because they were hoping, hey, maybe we'll get a few more beans sold to them. Maybe we'll get some other products like corn, for instance. I mean, we've been kind of looking at this lately, and U.S. corn definitely works into China right now. China's interior corn prices have been fairly stout. They didn't have the best crop last year, and so if they imported China into parts of the country, they could actually do so, and we've been hearing that they've been kind of asking around about U.S. corn. So none of that's happened yet. That did not go well yesterday as far as what the trade's expectations were, and then the other thing is that we've been pretty overbought here lately. So the market's definitely taking a breather here.
When we look at the Chinese situation, of course, we've heard really no solid commitments one way or the other here from the president as he leaves China. But also, this is the time of the year where China normally doesn't buy from us anyway. And so it doesn't seem like it's too far off to say that this is kind of normal until they would actually come back into the market where they need us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's no doubt that, in this situation, that especially on the bean side of things, I mean, right now, they're usually buying beans like it's going out of style out of Brazil. And so you wouldn't really expect them to buy anything unless they were essentially forced to. I think the trade was hoping that there'd be some sort of situation where they felt like they had to buy more beans in order to get what they wanted on the other side. So, it sounded like the biggest part of the conversation centered around them buying 200 planes off of Boeings, and I know that people in ag country don't necessarily want to hear that. But ag was definitely mentioned, where they said, hey, they're going to buy a lot of ag products. But I mean, we've all heard that kind of stuff before. I think what everyone was hoping for was some sort of a signed trade deal instead of a handshake agreement, because we all know that those handshake agreements can flip on a dime.
Well, that they can, because there's no way to enforce those by any way, shape, or form. And, of course, while ag products are not heavily mentioned, and we see more about the Boeing situation, I mean, considering the rift we have, anything is in the right direction is progress, I guess.
Yeah, I would assume so. There's no doubt that China really wants to get this Strait of Hormuz situation figured out. They get around 50% of their energy directly out of that particular area, buy a lot of oil off of Iran. And so China's wanting to get that all straightened out. At the same time, the U.S. wants to make sure they're going to do the appropriate amount of business is what we think is appropriate. So there's a lot of wrangling going on, and obviously right now the markets, after having such a strong run here lately, really corn, beans, and wheat, we're all just sitting here kind of pulling back. I am watching closely, for instance, with like December corn. As we speak, we're trading below the 50-day moving average, and it's acted as really good support over the last several weeks. If we could close back above that, I'd feel pretty good about this. But as of right now, we're trading below it. So it'll be an important day here.
We've been so focused this week on that Chinese trade meeting and also on the E15 thing in Congress. What other things have been happening in that grain market other than what you're talking about with the D's corn?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of things that can happen here. I mean, when you look at the cash side of things, there's no doubt that, there's just a lot of good things going on from a demand standpoint. Whenever you look, for instance, corn exports remain extremely strong. We're in a position here where it sure looks like the USDA could have raised exports here this week, but they did not. They chose not to do so. And, essentially what you've got is right now shipments are running around 30% ahead of a year ago's shipments. I mean, that's shipped corn. That's not just sales. But shipments are around 30% ahead, and USDA is forecasting 14-15% increase in exports. So, our demand right now looks solid as can be. Of course, crush demand's been fantastic for soybeans. So, there's a lot of good things going on. I do think, especially on the corn side of things, with there being some question marks as to how many of these acres of corn will end up being planted, I kind of feel like corn's got its own story without having to lean on something like, the Chinese demand story.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
Well, back on Iowa Ag Matters, and yesterday we got the export sales report, and we're going to hear more about that now as Riley talks with Ben Breisch of Allendale as they go through what those numbers look like here as the exports have been being watched very closely by the markets.
Ben, this week in the export sales, obviously some bigger news, but we're still looking at that export sales report. What have we seen the latest numbers in the USDA for the corn and soybeans?
Yes, absolutely. So this morning, we got our export sales. They came in at just about 685,000 tons sold, which is well within the range that we were looking at. For new crop, right, we had small purchases of about 400 tons, very small, but again, within the range. We were lacking on the old crop sales. Our range of expectations was between 1 million to 1.5 million, and they only came in at about 684. So a little bit lacking on the sales, but that's all right because really over the past few weeks, the export sales numbers on corn have been very strong. Really since the end of March on, we have been beating expectations week over week, which results in month over month better sales. And at this point, we only really need to see slightly above average trade to get us to USDA's goal. And as far as soybeans, we had about 182,000 tons sold, mostly on the old crop again. 102 came from old crop, just above the lower end of the estimates there, which came in at around 100 to 500,000, and a decent amount of new crop sold. Estimates range from 0 to 100,000 tons, and we got 80,000 new crop sales. While that is healthy for new crop beans, beans have been more sporadic over the past few months in terms of their general sales. We need to be seeing more consistent sales out of the beans for us to get to that USDA number. But this week is a standout week, and we do need to continue to see that as we go into the end of the year. The only concerning thing is when it comes to South America is going to be that their sales are going to be coming online soon. they're about to begin the depth of their harvest. And it's nice that we have a head start on these beans, but my concern comes from if this strength of sales are able to sustain over the next few weeks.
And then, Ben, when we think about recent flash sales, I know that at this time of year, we don't expect to see too many. Have we seen any recently, and where did they go to?
Yes, absolutely. So we did see some. They started picking up actually last week. We had some sales go to Mexico and South Korea, smaller sales, about 380,000 tons from corn to Mexico, and about 130,000 tons of corn for Korea. And yesterday's flash sales came in at a little bit stronger for beans, 252,000 tons of beans to unknown, and that's about what we had as of this morning. So that combined with today's export sales, very good sales numbers so far this week.
All right, and then when we look at the market situation in general, obviously those export sales, we're still looking at them, but right now the greater picture is that trade meeting between President Trump and President Xi of China. And so far, what we've heard from the agriculture side is, well, really not much. Are we hoping to hear a little bit more about that coming on and potentially, a trade deal to really get some support there?
Yeah, absolutely. So all this week, everything was leading up to this meeting between Trump and Xi. And there was a lot of hopes that we would see some more sales, specifically from the bean side. But after their initial meeting yesterday, or earlier this morning, it really doesn't look like there's going to be many more sales coming from China. So the fact is that we're setting back not because there's any cancellations. It's that the hope that we would see more sales and lack thereof now is the reason why we're seeing this corn and bean market fall apart and take a step back today. Does that continue? That's a good question. Trump leaves tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon out of China. So if nothing's talked about then, there may be more pressure ahead for this market.
In rural Iowa, you need reliable information. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network brings you ag-specific content like market trends, weather outlooks, and policy updates that matter to your operation, while your local station brings you community news and consistent updates on what is happening in your area. It's a partnership built for the challenges of rural life. Your farm, your local station, and your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters. Find us online at iowaagnet.com. Time to run down those basis bids for you here on Iowa Ag Matters on this Friday. I'm Dustin Huffman. Taking a look at cash bids around the state, only about a quarter of our elevators making any kind of price changes. Let's run them down. ADM Burlington 12 cents under on corn, $4.50. Soybeans 20 cents under at $11.63. Cargill Eddyville 22 cents under on corn, cash bid $4.40. New Co-op Algona 42 cents under on corn, $4.20. Soybeans 60 cents under, cash price $11.23. Ag State Sheldon 30 cents under on corn, $4.32. Soybeans 65 cents under at $11.18. Ag State Delta 35 cents under on corn, cash bid $4.27. Soybeans 60 cents under at $11.23. Cargill Cedar Rapids 20 cents under on corn, $4.42. Soybeans 30 cents under, $11.53 for the cash bid. Five Star Co-op Nashua 33 cents under on corn, $4.29. Soybeans 70 cents under at $11.13. Lincoln Way Energy Nevada 29 cents under on corn, $4.33 for the cash bid. ADM Des Moines 25 cents under on soybeans, cash price $11.58. New Co-op Red Oak 33 cents under on corn, $4.29. Soybeans 60 cents under, $11.23. Mid-Iowa Cooperative Green Mountain 46 cents under on corn, $4.16. Soybeans 76 cents under at $11.07 for the cash bid. New Co-op Sheraton 32 cents under on corn, the cash price $4.30. Soybeans 60 cents under at $11.23. Walk-On Feed Ranch 47 cents under on corn, $4.15. Soybeans 70 cents under, $11.13. New Co-op Glidden 41 cents under on corn, $4.21. Soybeans 60 cents under, $11.23. Innovative Ag Farley 46 cents under on corn, cash bid $4.16. Soybeans 69 cents under at $11.14. And finally today at Cargill and Muscatine, they're 22 cents under on corn at $4.40. Soybeans 32 cents under, the cash price $11.51. Cash corn and soybean bids are subject to change without notice. Always check with your local elevator when making sales to obtain the most recent price. That's been a check of your basis numbers here on Iowa Ag Matters. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this message.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
We know that conservation is closely tied with agriculture, but where does it play into policy? Mark Magnuson, in the latest episode of Pods of Potential, where you can find that online at iowaagnet.com, visits with the folks at Iowa Soybean to learn more.
Welcome into this episode of the Pods of Potential podcast. It's episode number 30, and today's topic of discussion is how conservation and ag policy overlap. And we're here with our friends at the Iowa Soybean Association today, joined by Chief Officer of Demand and Advocacy at Iowa Soybean Association, Matt Herman. Also joined by Story County farmer and ISA District 5 Director Dave Struthers, and Iowa State University Professor Mike Castellano. So once again, we're here at Dave's farm in Story County near Collins, and we're actually in the shop here today. So when you talk then on the water quality side as well, do we have a way to measure, because there have been so many more farmers adopting these practices just in recent years, can you see that uptick at the very small level when you're talking about like the number of farms that have picked up these practices just over the last few years? I don't know, 10, 15 years, whatever it may be. Can we see the actual results of that through water quality so far?
Yeah, Mark, that's a really, really tough challenge to actually measure outcomes in water quality. And that's why it's so important to measure the adoption of practices and the performance of practices on the farms in the state. So as you know, it's very hard to measure climate signals. Is it getting wetter? Is it getting drier? Is the temperature getting warmer over the long term? Because the year-to-year variability dominates. While growing corn and soybeans, really not corn and soybeans, while growing warm season annual crops for a relatively short period of the year is the primary cause of nitrate losses to the environment, the year-to-year variability, whether we have a high year like last year or a low year 2 years before that, that's driven by weather. And so picking up the improvements in the context of the weather variability is a challenge. And that's why we really like to see adoption on the farms and track adoption on the farms, in addition to tracking the outcomes in our waterways.
If I can add one thing onto that, Mark, too, I don't disagree with anything that Mike said there. Tracking it at the macro level is very difficult. But I think that's one of the reasons that at ISA, when we work with farmers in Iowa State and other partners to adopt the practices on the farm, we have basically a monitoring and verification plan, if you will, that's going along with that, where, our staff or partner staff is going back out to the farm to do things like tile water sampling, right? So we can see the impact of that at that local level and validate that, yes, that practice works. To Mike's point, it's going to be about continuing to scale that up to see the bigger trend.
And I can't give you an actual hard measurement, but on one of my no-till fields that's cover cropped, it takes a lot of water across it in heavy rainfall events. And first or second year I had cover crops, we had about a 4-inch rain in about an hour. And there was a lot of water moving across my field. It was bringing residue and dirt from the upstream neighbors that had tilled. And I didn't have any rutting or anything like that. My stuff was staying there. And so we know a lot of these nutrient losses happen with water movement and with soil particles attached in the water. And I wasn't losing my soil.
And Dave, to that point then, if you go out and tell that story to your neighbors or people in town or just anyone you meet at an Iowa soybean meeting, do you think that is a very powerful tool then to get other farmers on board with what you're doing in a practice like that?
Well, I sure think it would be helpful because, we all know that soil is our productive engine. We've got to have good, healthy soil to raise a good crop. And if we can keep that soil in place and keep those nutrients in that soil there in an active root system, in a growing cover crop system, I think that helps a lot because we don't have all these gullies. You see these people, some of these hills, and it washes down the hill, and they go out and they till the gully to make it smooth, which is great for the time they plant, and then the next time it gets a big rain, it just keeps moving that soil. And so it's a never-ending battle in that situation.
So Mike, back to you when we're talking about some of the research that you've been working on. How can this type of research influence policy?
Well, I think the answer to this question it gets back to the link between scale, right? So we can show at small scales with well-controlled research that things work and they lead to the outcomes that we believe them to lead to, and understand how. And then that allows us to scale to the next level. And Dave's been a great participant in our on-farm research, where using advances in precision ag, folks like Dave conduct fully replicated, scientifically robust experiments on their farms. They bring the data back to us in partnership with Iowa Soybean Association. We show at that point it can work on the farm and that we're really getting buy-in there. And I think that's when we're really able to link to policy levers and show policymakers that it's time to encourage these things to be distributed across many farms. I'll also add, too, back on the link to the water quality, many of these things, there is a scale issue, and that is, that's really where we need policy to help too, upscaling the research, because measuring it on an individual farm, it's not so tough, but measuring the aggregate influence on many farms, that's where it becomes a challenge, and we can use some help there.
Stay up to date with the latest in the ag industry with Agribusiness Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Each weekday, we bring you the latest advancements in farming, from new precision ag technology to cutting-edge sustainable farming practices. Agribusiness Matters is also your source for the most relevant ag news, policy discussions, and insights that are shaping the future of agriculture. Tune in to Agribusiness Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters.
Hi, my name is Ethan Smith, and I've been a certified crop advisor in Iowa for about 6 years. The Iowa CCA program is valuable to me because it helps keep me informed on new topics and research around the industry, including soils, insects, diseases, and much more. It's also a great way to network with others around the state and beyond. Iowa is known for its crops, and that's why we're here. To learn more about becoming a certified crop advisor, visit iowacca.org.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
It's time now for a check of the midday markets here on Iowa Ag Matters. I'm Riley Smith. On the phone right now with Lori Carter of Comstock as we take a look at the midday markets. Lori, it's been a very busy week in the ag marketplace. Here at midday, how are those grains trading?
The grains are all extremely weak across the board. We have Kansas City wheat down 23 cents pretty much all the way through. Chicago down 22 and a quarter to 25 cents. Corn is down 11 cents on old crop and down 9.5 on new crop December. Soybeans down 17 up front and 13.5 out in the new crop.
So we know that President Trump is back from his meeting out in China, a trade meeting, and unfortunately, we didn't hear too much about agriculture yet, though we could still hear about that. Looking here at the ag marketplace, is that the case for why we're seeing that red on the screen?
I think so. I think maybe just disappointment that we actually don't have any kind of news out of that. We've, run up earlier in the week, so kind of just giving all that back with the lack of new news.
And next week looking to be a lot less busy than this week was. And we had several reports and, of course, that trade meeting. Do we think that the news from this week could get factored in pretty quickly and then next week would potentially be maybe a little bit quieter and just more calm seas for the markets?
I would hope that it would be calm seas, but I'm not sure that we have any of that to look forward with. Still continuing troubles in Iran, energy markets still volatile. I guess I still think some of that could spill over into the grain.
All right, and then over on the livestock side of things, how are cattle and hogs trading at midday?
Cattle continue to be resilient. They're both green. We have fat cattle up $1.27 to $1.72, and feeder cattle up $2.90 to $4 further out. The hogs are weak. They're down $1.42. So kind of a continuation of what we have seen in those markets.
And then with those cattle prices, are we thinking that we could see potentially that demand shift? We talk about it for a while of shifting from beef to pork. I know the consumer, if they want beef, they're going to get it, but it is feeling like we're hitting that breaking point of the consumer looking at their budget and saying that pork might be the better option.
I would agree. You would think that would happen. Probably been thinking that for a while, but the spread between the two is pretty close to record wide. And I believe it's like that in the grocery store too. So yes, I would think so. And we do have seen signs of a demand dropping off in the beef as far as the number of loads of meat that are being sold. So I think that's happening to some degree.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
At midday, July corn down 11 even at 456 and a half. December new crop down 9.5 at 481 and 3/4. July soybeans down 17 and a quarter at 1175 and a quarter. November new crop down 13 and a quarter at 1170 and a quarter. On the Merc, June live cattle up $1.07 at 253.15. May feeders up 62 cents at 368.20. June lean hogs down 95 cents at 98.57. June pork cutout went unchanged at 114.47. That's been a check in the midday markets here on Iowa Ag Matters. I'm Riley Smith. You're listening to Iowa Ag Matters. Riley Smith on the show today, filling in for Mark Magnuson, and Dustin Huffman filling in for Mark on the opening market conversation. And we're rejoining that conversation now with Matt Bennett of agmarket.net to get a look at what has been happening in the livestock markets.
All right, moving over to the livestock side of things. It's been a kind of a volatile week for cattle, and the hogs have been just kind of up one day, down the next. What are we seeing there heading into the end of the week?
Yeah, volatile would be putting it mildly, Dustin. As you know, this thing's been all over the place. A couple days ago, of course, fats were up $5, and then yesterday we tried to go even higher, made a new high from the previous day, but then we closed lower on the day. I think it looks like more of a consolidation type trade. If you look at the chart, it looks like we're going to struggle to go up and make new highs, but at the same time, we're fluttering up there awfully close. And then you look over at the cash side of things, cash market is just strong as can be, whether you're talking fats, feeders. And the other thing is, remember on beef demand, of course, is that you're in grilling season, and guys like you and I, we've been known to eat a lot of meat, so there's going to be a lot of folks, I think, that are going to keep this demand pretty darn strong here for the next several months.
Obviously, we know cattle producers are making a decent money right now, but the thing is, the consumers are in a tough situation.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think where I get really concerned, Dustin, whenever it comes to cattle, is the guy that's going out trying to fill his pens right now. If you're buying those feeders and, you're not growing what you're feeding them. So if you're having to buy the feeders, buy the feed, and then try to find black ink out there on the deferred markets, that's pretty tough row to hoe. Whereas your front month, June, you're at 250, 277. You go out there to October and you're down at 239. And so, you can still probably find a little black ink in there if you're efficient. You don't have a whole lot of death loss, but at the same time, you've got to kind of step out on a limb of faith like the cattle producer usually does. A lot of these guys don't do much risk management. It's worked out well for them in most of their careers, but at the same time, you get caught on the wrong side of this, and it could end an operation pretty quick.
And one last thing about hogs, we know that Mexico and Canada are considering changing some of their imports due to the pseudo-rabies cases that were found in Iowa and Texas. Any more word on that and what effect that could have?
No, I haven't heard a whole lot on it, to be totally honest with you. I think this hog market, though, whenever you look at it, if you look at the cattle charts, if you look at the hog chart, it's two totally different worlds, whereas cattle, of course, went ramping up and then backed off and then went back up towards the highs. You look, for instance, at August hogs, and shoot, you're still fluttering $6-8 off the highs. And The thing about it is that you've got a lot of upfront demand, and I think a lot of that is some of your replacement type demand. So guys that are thinking about grilling this weekend, instead of spending $30 on a ribeye, they might spend $8 or $10 on a pork chop, and that's certainly understandable at times. And I think that's one thing that's kept us real strong up front.
In rural Iowa, we know you're sold on your local radio station. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network partners with local Iowa stations to deliver the latest in agriculture news, including grain elevator prices, market reports, and ag policy news. Trusted local voices, trusted ag content. This message is brought to you by your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters. We know the ag industry here in the United States touches just about every other industry in the country, and that is no exception even when it comes to NASA. Dustin had the chance recently to visit with Karen St. Germain to talk about the relationship between NASA and agriculture.
And I am here at NASA talking with Karen St. Germain, and you are, again, I'll have you tell us what your role is again at NASA.
I'm the Director of Earth Science for NASA.
Director of Earth Science. So when we think about agriculture in Iowa, around the United States, we don't always think about the space program. Tell us a little bit about what NASA's doing to help with agriculture in the U.S. and food security around the world.
Well, NASA is America's space agency, and one of the things we do is use that unique vantage point of space to benefit in a very direct way life here on Earth. And agriculture is one of our longest served communities. For decades, we've been flying satellites that look back at the Earth, and they measure things that are really important to both producers and the market.
And it's really interesting when you talk about the use of satellites, for example, going on crop tours and things like that, where we're looking at the fields, the depth that you guys are able to get down and analyze things is just flabbergasting, quite frankly.
It really is. So many people know about the Landsat mission, and Landsat is looking at the vegetation itself and providing critical information about the health and the productivity. But we also have sensors that can map soil moisture and even see depletion and recharging of aquifers, looking at moisture in the root zone. So really we're trying to look at and of course weather satellites. So We're trying to look at the whole system that affects the growing season.
And so then we look at that data you guys are collecting. What are you able then to do and turn around and help agriculture out with that?
Yeah, there are a number of things we do. One of the things we do is provide situational awareness tools like the drought monitor. We contribute to the WASD. We provide routine measurements of the growing conditions as they are right now. But maybe the more important or more impactful work we do is the modeling work that allows us to project into the future, so producers can see what's coming.
Okay, can you give us an example of how that gets used?
Yeah, one of the great ways is many of our producers are in a situation where their growing conditions are changing. And they've got to adjust the way they manage to try to maximize the quality and quantity of their yield. So one of the things we're working on, and this is a project in Iowa, it's called AVAIL, a virtual agriculture innovation laboratory. Yep. And the idea there is to model a particular piece of land, a particular farm, and then using a crop model, assess the likely yields for a variety of weather conditions, and then allow the farmer in a virtual environment to test different management techniques to try to maximize the yield at the end of the year.
Okay, so definitely some great information that'll be helping with farmers. And of course, right now, obviously, speaking of the last couple of weeks, their interest in the space situation has grown exponentially once again with the missions. I mean, obviously, people are talking in Iowa like, well, how are you going to feed those people? How are you going to do all that stuff? And agriculture wants to play a role in that. How does that partnership look?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, because in NASA, we have a lot of collaboration between earth science and space science. So one of the really important things to figure out is in space travel, with humans, how are we going to provide the nutrients, the food that they need? And so we've been running experiments on the space station for years. And in fact, the results, the things we learn trying new seeds and new management approaches on the space station have helped us do things like develop more drought-resistant seed here on Earth. So there's a lot of back and forth and interplay that helps both life here at home and the prospect for exciting space travel.
All right. So if farmers want to learn more about what NASA's doing with agriculture, learn about some of these things that you're making available, where's the best way for them to get that conversation started?
Well, you can just go right to nasa.gov and click on Earth, and you'll learn all about our programs.
Well, Karen, I thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us about these programs today with NASA.
Thank you.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
Well, that's going to put the wraps on Iowa Ag Matters for today and for this week. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. Don't forget Weekend Ag Matters coming up on several affiliates and online here at iowaagnet.com as well. Thanks to Riley. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to you for listening. We'll see you back here on Monday on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.